What is going on, guys? Jack here and welcome back to another Football Manager 2019 video. And today we're going to be going through a method that I've used for many years in Football Manager through various saves to get very good regens for free. This is a method that does require you to have the USA loaded as a league. I'd always say if you're managing in not necessarily the biggest league in the world, to have America loaded just for this reason. The players you can pick up here are very good. Some of them will go on to have immense potential. Sometimes they don't quite reach it, but regardless, for the value for money that you're getting, you're not going to get better players like this anywhere. And unlike the method that I showed earlier on during the FM19 beta for kind of free regens at the start of your save, this is something that you could do at any point during the year reliably to get very good players. So the reason that I call it the North American regen method is because it revolves around the USA and Canada. Basically, for those of you who don't know, in real world football in America, they have a draft system whereby young players that don't get signed to MLS academies but play kind of, university level and such, after a period of time when they graduate, they go into a draft where the MLS teams take it in turns to pick players. These players, of course, are on, non-contracts. They're not contracted to any team. But in Football Manager, there are no university academies. There's no such thing. Nothing like that is actually covered. Instead, there are various kind of fake teams created, which you can actually see. If we go to major clubs and view all clubs, you'll see that once we get beyond kind of the American third division, you have all these teams here, and these are all kind of youth teams with various different players. And at the start of the game, and indeed throughout Football Manager, they will continually produce regens. So if you have America loaded, even at the start of a save, they'll produce regens like this guy here, and this is just the first player I've clicked on. Obviously, for this specific tutorial, I have attribute masking turned off, so I don't have the fog of war. If you play with that on, there are still many different ways that I'm going to show you for how you can find these kind of players. But for example, we have Zane Doody here. He is 18 years old, and we can just approach to sign him. And he wants to join immediately. So we'll see what contract we can give him here. We'll give him a 5-year deal or 4-year deal, £1,300 a week. And yeah, he will get a work permit. I should point out that for this example, I am playing in the Danish Super League as Randers. And I'm bottom of the league. I've just holidayed forward a bit in time for a moment that will become apparent later on in the tutorial as to why I've gone forward. But yeah, we're rock bottom. We aren't playing in the Danish league. There's nothing significant about this team whatsoever. We have a wage budget of £6,000 here. And yeah, but I'm going to just show you how effective this method can be even with a team like this. So Zane Doody looked pretty good. Of course, you could then go to the players tab here and just flick through players. If you do have the fog of war on, you're going to have to guess a little bit more. You might want to individually scout players. Another thing worth mentioning is the fact that the nationalities of these American teams are very, very random. There will be mostly American players, but you will get some odd nationalities. So one way that you can do things is you can just go to club list and then go through things here. We just went on Soccer Chicago. We could go to FC Delco, look at their key player. It's this guy, Chen. Again, he looks pretty good. If we wanted to sign him, we can just approach to sign him. Wants to be a rotation option. Worth noting that a player who is under the age of 18 won't move until they come of age. One thing that's worth noting is with these teams, obviously they are fictional teams, I believe, at least for the most part, and you can't click on their league divisions. They don't exist. However, you can flick through the teams using the kind of quick links here. So very quickly you can start going through players. As you can see here, the New York Red Bulls Academy is here. Their players are all... Actually, I thought most of their players would be contracted. It seems like they're not. And again, actually, you can just raid the academies. But yeah, this is one way that you can certainly go about doing things. Of course, you can just scout all these players. Obviously, you will need a higher scouting range to be able to do this. Speaking of which, just to talk about this briefly, obviously, you have your scouting packages here. I was able to switch my youth package to world and my senior package to world, even playing as Randers here with a little bit of movement of the scouting and transfer budgets. Whilst obviously you might be, say, knocking off £100,000 of your transfer budget to get the scouting budget required to do this kind of package, even if it's just for 1 month. The reality is that all these players you sign are coming in 100% free. There is no fee attached to them whatsoever other than any agent fees. So as a result, the transfer budget taking a little bit of a hit isn't the end of the world. Of course, the other thing of note is you could just upgrade your youth packages for 1 month and then just sit them back down once you finish doing this method. And yeah, it's a really effective way to just go about getting players. Obviously, I've shown here about how you can quick flick through these leagues. So at the moment we're in the NAL Atlantic division, and we can obviously continue to look through these players and just look at the key players. We could easily go through each squad if we wanted to. Like a lot of kind of regen hunting methods in Football Manager, the more effort you put in, the better the results you're going to get out here. But the other thing that's worth noting is that obviously you can go through each individual division. So we just went through the I can't remember the division now. It was one of the Atlantic division, I think the NAL Atlantic division. If we go to Dallas Texans here, who are in the Frontier division, I can now use the quick flicks here to quickly flick through all the different teams in this division. As I said, the MLS academies do play in these divisions, but you can still poach their players. So, for example, this guy, Santi Hernandez, looks superb. He plays for the Dynamo Academy. I'm going to get rid of the wage rises for kind of playing football because this guy might well be good enough to play for us. £655. He is accepted a week, this guy. I mean, look at him. 16 years old, Spanish. What I'll do is I'll get a few scout reports on a few of the players who I evaluate as being good enough to sign, and we'll see what our scouts say about them. Of course, the reviews aren't going to be necessarily that accurate when it comes to the reports. With these players generally, most of them will end up having potential abilities in around the 130 range, the better ones, which is low-end Premier League quality when fully developed. However, through some tests that I did, you will find players in these kind of different academies having potential abilities right up there as high as 170, 180, future Ballon d'Or winners even, dare I utter it. But the thing that's perhaps worth remembering is that a lot of these players have all this potential, but they won't necessarily reach it playing in America. Just the way American youth progression works in Football Manager is kind of low and very slow. So as a result, players don't generally reach that potential. Anyway, I talked about the reason I've gone holidaying into the future, and I'm going to talk about that now. So I talked earlier about the fog of war and the fact that if you have a tribute masking on, you're probably not going to want to go through each and every player. And I also talked about the fact that obviously I'm holidaying into the future. The reason for doing this is another way to find these players is simply by looking at the under-20s teams for the United States and Canada. In the under-20s teams, some of these players, the better of the kind of regen bunch, will get called up, and as a result you can identify them and pick them up quite easily. Naturally, you might not have the time, patience or money to scout every single player in North America, so for example in this case here we've gone forward 3 months into the save game. Already there are 5 of these players who are regens playing in the national team. We've got here Greg Klein, who looks like a pretty solid centre-back. We've also got here Gio Matei, who is a goalkeeper playing for Colorado Rush, who looks pretty good again. You could approach to sign this guy. Wage demands on these players slightly higher. You'll see here we have Brovsky and Handy, who I've already put transfer bids in. I actually had my recording software just fail on me, so I had to put in an edit where I bid on these players. But you can see here, £2,000 for Brovsky. That is very, very good indeed. Of course, these players, you've got to remember, we're signing them. There is absolutely no fee attached. There's no compensation required, nothing like that. These players are 100% free. I'm going to scout all the players that we're signing, so we'll just see what our scouts think of them. I'd always encourage you to scout these players as well, just because sometimes they'll have very high current ability and limited potential ability. Of course, if you had attribute masking on so you couldn't see all these player stats, you'd still just be able to maybe scout a few of these players, the ones at national teams, to really kind of narrow things down. Again, you can do the same here at Canada. And this has been a method in general that I've been using for years now in Football Manager. Of course, the fact that we're able to do it here at Randers perhaps gives you an idea of kind of the fact that you don't have to be the biggest team in the world to be able to make these kind of players sign for you. And the other thing to note is, obviously, with these players, they are, obviously very raw talent still. They're all 16, 17, obviously a few slightly older, but regardless, they're players who you're going to have to give a bit of patience to develop. Occasionally, you will find an absolute world beater in these teams. Very often you'll see Bundesliga teams pick up these players. In this example here, I've only got 2 leagues loaded. I've got the Danish leagues and the American leagues. But if you have some of the big European leagues, if you were to go and look through the team's future transfers after the first summer transfer window, you'd certainly find teams who have found a fair few of these players. So anyway, I talked about the fact you can use the USA and Canada national teams to help you narrow down your search if you don't want to go through each and every single one of these teams. Another method you can do, again, involves the player search filters. Again, reminder, you want the scouting and youth packages fully upgraded that you can see here. And then within the filters themselves, you can see we have 4 set up here. We have based set in North America, contract status is amateur, age is at most 21, and UFAPs, which is under international, we have to at least 1. I touched upon earlier the fact that these players end up with some very weird nationalities just because of the way the game treats them. As a result, they will very often get called up for the under 21 teams of their national sides. And this can be quite an effective way to identify the hot talent. You know, if there's a player playing in America who's Peruvian and he's getting called up to play for Peru, there is an okay chance that he's going to have potential. And very quickly you could, you know, if you don't want to scout all the players and go for all the teams, narrow your field of view in terms of your search down to these players, get scout reports on them, get analyst reports, and check them out. You can see this guy, an Irish player, Sean Murphy, playing for Core Valley. He looks pretty solid, and of course if you were managing in Ireland, you could almost certainly pick up this guy. He is slightly on the older side of things, so he might not be quite as good. But yeah, you get a variety of different nationalities. You can see here Jamaican, Trinidad and Tobago. And while some of these players aren't going to be so good, you will, if you hunt hard enough, find very, very talented players in here. Obviously, the advantage of this kind of method is that because you're not paying any transfer fees, you can afford to, you know, try and sign a load of these players. You've really not got to be too picky. Some of them have extremely low wage demands, like Stelios here as well, which again plays into your hands. So you can just go mad. And because there's no transfer fees, there's no kind of reason not to hoard a lot of these players. At worst, you're padding out your under-21s team with some okay talent for the foreseeable future. At best, maybe you've got a future star on your hand, you know. And the thing with these players is you're bringing them in on free transfers. Even if they only develop a little bit, you're never really going to lose money on them. You're always going to be able to shift them on for something. I'll be honest, looking through the ones that I've kind of identified here so far, they've been a little on the rubbish side. The further you go into a save, obviously these players will continue to produce, but also you could always start to knock up the UFAPs. So you've got players who have played more than one game. Because we've only had 1 international break since the start of this save game, they can only have got 2 appearances so far. But you could, you know, start fiddling with these filters. I'm sure you guys can come up with some creative ways to use them to further refine your search to find some of the best talented players. And again, from these players, from these search results, you could start just flicking through the teams. Generally, the American players are better, but occasionally you'll see, you know, various different nationality players get thrown up here. And, well, this is just the method that if you're playing in the smaller leagues, maybe you don't have the biggest budget, you can definitely use and get some very good success out of it. It's a very good way to make money. Even in League One, you can use this system. Of course, work permit's always going to be a problem with Brexit, but you know, because of these players having somewhat wonky nationalities from time to time, you can certainly, you know, find very good players who will be able to get work permits if you look hard enough. The other thing is there are so many young American players produced through this method. Relying solely on the national team is a bit of a flawed effort. I guess you do want to, if you have time, just go through these teams. Even if you're not flicking through all the players in the squads, just look at the key players, scout those, you know, if you can. Honestly, you're going to have good players here who longer term can really develop into stuff and be key players for you. And as with any regen method, as I already mentioned, this is one of those things where there are lots of good players playing in these areas. If you look hard enough, you'll find them. If you're patient enough with it all, you'll be able to get some of them. And it's just a very good way to make money, develop players without that massive spotlight fee. And to be honest, I'm amazed that this is still in Football Manager. It's been in the game for a number of years. It's always been this good. I would like to think that Football Manager might see this video and go, maybe we should change things here. Although maybe you guys aren't thinking that, having seen this. I mean, a player like this guy, not got the craziest mentals, but his actual kind of ability elsewhere is very, very good. And if we look to sign him, actually, he wants a little bit more in the way of wages, £1,400 a week. But you kind of get the idea. There are good players here. I'm going to scout a load of these and just holiday forward a few days, and we'll just have a look at the potential that gets thrown out. Of course, with me being a Danish team with 1 scout, it's very unlikely that these scout reports are going to be particularly accurate. But if you're one of the bigger teams, I would always encourage you to scout these players before signing them. You know, don't be deceived if you see some attributes and they look really good. I think Doody, actually, of the players we looked at, who was the first player we stumbled upon by chance, might be the best looking kind of player. But yeah, you can see here players like this guy, John Bond, 16 years old, left footed, has low determination, but we can overcome that. He looks very, very good as a centre back. You know, physicals are very, very solid. Aerial ability could perhaps be a little bit better, but for a player you can sign for free for what, maybe £900 to £1,000. I'm just doing this to ensure that I can get them. It's an absolute steal, and yeah, I could do this all day. I'm not going to do it all day, guys. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go forward. We'll have a look at our team, look at the players that I kind of identified during this kind of short search. Obviously, kind of difficult to multitask and be looking for players whilst talking to you guys. But hopefully there'll be a few gems here to really kind of emphasise the point that I'm trying to make. Okay guys, so I just holidayed forward a couple of weeks. As you can see here, 6 of the players joined immediately, 2 of them come in the future. You can see looking at the scout reports how good they are. Obviously the star ratings are relative to the team that you are managing in it, as well as the league. There's kind of an algorithm there. So these 5-star potential players in other leagues might not be quite so good, but for the Danish Superliga, I mean, you can see the star ratings here. I did demote the entire senior team just down a division just to look at these guys cleanly. But yeah, you can see here Zayn Doody, actually now on international duty with the under-20s. And of course, the other thing is we're now on another international break. And what you could very easily do is, repeatedly check up on things here. So you can see there is a load of new players here who I didn't know about before who have just been called up. So this guy playing for Arsenal's youth team that's in America, Giametai, is kind of appeared. Taylor Edwards, I don't think he was there before. Greg Klein was there before. And John Bond, we were looking at signing. He's now been called in. This guy, Josh Chen, looks like a very, very good left back actually at 17 years old. We can go in for him. So, yeah, you can kind of see here how by repeatedly checking the under-20s, over the course of the year, you can very easily and quickly just see kind of what's going on in terms of players. Anyway, in terms of the kind of other players that we signed, so we talked about Doody. Brovsky comes in. He signed a £2,000 a week contract. He is considered joint best striker in the team. Professional personality, lots of room to improve in the future. Jose Handy here, you can see good potential on this guy as well. As I mentioned, sometimes these players don't do as well as you'd hope. This guy from South Africa, only very limited potential. Of course, there's a chance that the scout report is wrong on these potentials, but our actual staff member has reasonable judging player ability and knowledge, and I don't think he'd be that far wrong. Mohamed Wabi here, you can see the Moroccan player, looks like a pretty good striker, only 18 years old. He's only just turned 18 as well, so he's got time to try and fulfill that potential. And, well, you can see with these players, at worst, you are getting a player who you're just going to let go of a free transfer and have had to pay the wages for. At best, you're going to have players who are going to be, hands down good enough for this division. Players like Doody here looks great and has that potential to be really good going forward. And you're either going to have them and they're going to become superstars for you, or you're going to be able to sell them on. You can see, as I mentioned, players under the age of 18 don't join immediately, but John Bond agreed to join us on a contract. And also Santi Hernandez from the Dynamo Academy agreed to sign for us as well, the 16-year-old Spanish player. I mean, you can see here we did get a scout report on him. Professional personality, 5-star potential for this division. He's only 16 years old. He looks very, very solid here. And of course, even with the fog of war on, he was listed as their key player. So you could easily use that as a method for finding players if you just wanted to kind of limit your scouting down. You could probably even just target MLS Academy teams if you really wanted to try and see if that's a good way of finding some of the best young American talent. Anyway, guys, that's going to be all from this video from me. I do hope you found this useful. If you did find something useful in it or learn something new, please do leave a like on the video. It is massively, massively appreciated. If you've got any comments, thoughts, leave them down below. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. And other than that, it is me, Jack, and I will talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.